all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, since we've gone through all of the formalities of the consent calendar, everything else in the meeting last evening, we will move on, and this is the time and place to consider item number 8, zoning ordinance amendment number 2019-03 to amend several sections of the transit zoning code. Note, recommendations on this matter will be forwarded to the City Council for final determination. If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please file a request to speak with the Secretary. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Before we begin, do any of the commissioners have anything to disclose with regards to this item?
No.
Okay. The dynamic trio.
Thank you, Chairman McLaughlin. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Tonight's discussion is on the Transit Zoning Code amendments. The city adopted the Transit Zoning Code back in 2010, the City Council. It provides a framework for transit-oriented development in the center city area, providing for residential, mixed-use, commercial, and limited industrial activities. And it is a form-based code similar to Metro East and Harbor plans. For a quick recap from the study session that we held, form-based codes focus on the design of the building and how they relate to the street, and then are supplemented with the uses that can go into them. And again, to recap from the study session on this item, this is the Transit Zoning Code area. It's a large portion of the central city that extends from the left to the right from Flower Street on the west, more or less toward the 5 freeway on the east and Grand Avenue, the area below Civic Center Drive and above First Street. The different colors on this map represent what are called land use districts or sub-districts within the Transit Zoning Code area. They range in allowable uses from like the center of downtown area being mostly commercial mixed use, and then the beige and yellowish colors being mostly residential as you move toward the 5 freeway, and then some other colors like magenta for corridor commercial uses and deep red for the most intense development areas near the train station. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Pedro Gomez.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission may recall that staff provided some information at the March 25th Planning Commission meeting through a work study session where we discussed a couple of the recent projects that we've seen, pending projects that are being proposed currently, including the First American Title Company, the 3rd and Broadway, and the Red Oak North Cape Gonzalez, all 3 which are mixed-use projects. And at that time, we also discussed the proposed amendments. We did let the Planning Commission know that we would be continuing with analyzing these amendments and bringing forward the proposed changes to the Planning Commission, in addition to kind of taking those to the City Council for consideration as well, pending Planning Commission's consideration. So tonight, we're bringing forward those amendments for the Planning Commission's consideration. Again, these include amendments to development standards that are related to building height, parking, setbacks and massing, some open space considerations, minor development standards which are related to lot depth and driveway width, and really some cleanup items that include typographical errors. The first amendment for Planning Commission's consideration is a change in the maximum allowed height in the line block building type within the downtown subzone. Currently, the maximum height for this line block is 5 stories. Staff is proposing that this be amended for a maximum of 10 stories. Within the downtown subzone, there's currently a maximum allowable height of 10 stories with a flex block. Staff is recommending that this amendment be made to match this existing 10-story limit allowed for the flex block within the same downtown subzone. This would allow for taller building types in the downtown subzone, allow for additional opportunities on smaller blocks to create consistency. What staff is seeing that this requirement doesn't allow for some of those smaller blocks, which is kind of more of the average with 120 lot depth that you'll see in there. It doesn't allow for those lots to be developed, so this would allow for kind of more of those lots to be developed up to the 10 stories of what we already have in the downtown, what we already allow. The next set of amendments really are related to off-street parking. First, staff is recommending that the existing parking options currently active within the Transit Village and the downtown subzone be extended to the urban center subzone. These parking options include paying an in-lieu fee and participating in what we're calling the Park Once program, or what is called the Park Once program. Right now we have these different options as to how a developer can meet the parking requirements in the code. To date, all applicants have chosen to essentially build parking. However, the code in the downtown subzone and the Transit Village subzone allow you allow a developer two more options, including the in-lieu option, which is where a developer can essentially pay into a pot of money that the city could later use to build parking. The second would be exercising the Park Once policy. This Park Once program would allow people to park their car once and circulate throughout the downtown, or by transit, either by transit or by walking. One of these things that the Park Once program could potentially provide is physical improvements, signage and support programs, such as potentially valet programs, shuttles, or other options. Allowing a combination of these on-site parking, the in-lieu payment, or even participation in the Park Once program would provide kind of a broader range of parking options to satisfy the on-site parking requirements currently in the Transit Zoning Code. The second off-street parking amendment being proposed is to allow for parking exemptions for historic buildings in the urban center. We currently allow this parking exemption in the downtown subzone. What staff is proposing is that that be extended to the urban center as well, to kind of allow greater flexibility for those tenant spaces to be occupied without having to provide those parking requirements for those historic buildings. The next proposed amendment is related to setback and massing standards. The first of these two amendments would propose to eliminate a requirement of a 100-foot setback for buildings between 7 to 10 stories within the downtown subzone. Again, this is related to the size and availability of the lots in the downtown. We're seeing that there's about an average of lots that are about 120, and so this requirement really makes those lots, you can't develop those lots if you kind of apply that strict requirement. So staff is proposing that we eliminate it to kind of allow the development of these lots. The second amendment is related to the allowable massing. Currently, the Transit Zoning Code requires a massing reflecting a certain percentage of the ground floor footprint. Again, this was something that we discussed at the work study, but what I'd like for you guys to do is just imagine the wedding cake, where the bottom of the wedding cake is kind of the largest tier, and as you go up to the taller portions of the wedding cake, the tier gets smaller. This wedding cake style is really more of an informal reference to buildings with those distinct tiers. Each setback, the higher you go up. Staff has identified that this requirement is fairly restrictive. What we're seeing is that the pending projects don't exactly fit within these guidelines and these standards. And what we're seeing is that it results in kind of a bulky base that gets kind of progressively narrower. So what we'd like to do is propose that the requirements get amended to allow up to 85% to some of those upper levels. Specifically, the amendment would allow 85% allow 85% of the ground floor for stories 3 to 10. This would create a more realistic development standard and take into account the downtown's area, the area smaller than average lot depths. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Selena.
In regards to open space standards, currently the code requires or specifies that the open space be located at the rear and the side yards of the property. So the proposed amendment would be to modify this to simply remove the words rear and side and allow for open space to be on any side of the building, including the front. What this does is it can create a eyes on the street effect where it would provide open space in areas with greater visibility and activate the ground floor levels. It also provides for a greater opportunity for the public to also enjoy these open space areas on the development projects. In regards to lot depths, currently, in order to construct a flex block, line block, and stacked block architectural style of building, the minimum lot size needs to be anywhere from 130 to 170 feet. But our average blocks in downtown are 250 by 250 feet, typically separated by an alley or in half for each side of the block being owned by different property owners. So on average, the lot depth is 120 feet. So the standard that we have is somewhat unrealistic to our current conditions of our lot size in downtown. The amendment would therefore allow a minimum of 100-foot lot depth for flex block, line block, and stack block. This opens up the number of architectural styles and developments that we can see in downtown and helps provide for a better urban form, different types of buildings and styles. In regards to driveway widths, the current maximum is 25 feet. This is so that we don't have our blocks in downtown comprised primarily of driveways. We want this to be a pedestrian-friendly environment where you're not conflicting with vehicles entering or exiting the site and pedestrians on the street. So there is a maximum of 25 feet, and the proposed amendment is to modify this with a footnote to include that it would provide administrative relief if the driveway does need to be wider than 25 feet in order to accommodate a trash truck or a fire truck in order to service the site. And these are standard driveway widths that are set with OCFA and also the trash service providers. So we're noticing that that set very hard limit doesn't exactly work to provide function to the site. And finally, the one basically cleanup item is in regards to a reference section throughout the building types for minimum lot widths and depths. Currently, we provide or kind of repeat what information is provided in table BT1, which is kind of this overall standard guiding downtown. And with this repetition and information and numbers, it can create conflicts and errors. So basically, we're just referring the text, instead of listing 100 feet by 200 feet, to just say, refer back to table BT1 for your development size. And finally, just inconsistencies or cleanups throughout that are needed, very minor. So pending the Planning Commission's action tonight, the next steps would be that this is referred to City Council. So that would be on June 4th for an introduction, on June 18th for a second reading, and then potentially could be in effect, this ordinance and these changes, by July 18th. With that, that concludes staff's presentation. The recommendation is to adopt a resolution for City Council approval of the zoning ordinance amendment that we've drafted and included in the exhibits of your staff report tonight.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions of staff? David?
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions. One, going back to the off-street parking amendment, you referenced the Park Once program and potential property participating in this Park Once program. Can you give us an example just of how what that would look like in a prospective property? What is that actually?
Sure. Park Once programs, they can take a variety of forms. They're often crafted for each local jurisdiction, local area, so they meet that area's needs. But in concept, imagine the concept of like a mall where you park your car once to go to Macy's and then go eat, and go to the theater and then leave. You don't drive from Macy's to the theater to the restaurant. In more like commercial areas like downtowns, I think a local example that I can provide would be Balboa Peninsula in Newport Beach, where same thing, you know, things are so compact and walkable that you would park your car there like in a city-owned parking lot and then just walk around, and there's wayfinding signage. There might be shuttles to help people move around like in Laguna Beach. So those are the sort of components that it could entail. There would be crafted incentives and kind of design features, be it shuttles, be it wayfinding signage, be it better sort of location identifications of available parking, things like apps, illumination that would help people basically be able to park once and move around without reparking their car.
So in,
Could I add to that description? This is something that we are going to be adopting, and we actually have a consultant online to prepare this, and we'll be bringing it back before you. And the goal of it is we have a lot of parking downtown that nobody uses, right? We have a lot of structures that are empty most of the day. We're also talking about having 24-hour uses. So we're having residential uses as well as restaurants that are different from businesses. So the program will use these techniques that Ali has described. However, they're going to be based on analysis that looks at what we have in terms of parking, when we have parking available, when we don't have it available, and how to get people from the available spaces to the places that they want to go. And so creating that. So it's a whole package thing. And we can't use it. The way that the transit zoning code is written is we can't reduce or modify parking standards. And there will be, related to this program, will be, you know, what we can reduce parking standards for, what we can't, how we can administer that. So it will help us, guide us in approving new applications so that we can best use our parking resources, because we do have a lot of parking resources.
so practically speaking, let's say one of the properties along downtown, I think Spurgeon Building is an example. I believe under transit zoning code they could potentially do residential in the upstairs, second, if they wanted to go through the process of converting, right? And
They could do conversion of, that's one of the things that our code allows of historic buildings in particular.
and maybe with it being historic,
Adaptive reuse.
I guess maybe with it being historic, it's not a good example, because I imagine part of what we're looking at is exemptions for historic buildings. But let's say there's another building that is not historic that would allow for conversion into residential, but that wouldn't have, it's landlocked, doesn't have parking available, right?
Right.
So if that property owner wanted to then provide parking or needed to provide some type of parking, there's an in lieu payment. I'm assuming there's a certain dollar figure that would be attached. Here it's saying in lieu payment and or park once. So I'm just trying to understand, practically speaking,
Right.
what is that park once? Are they contributing to some type of cost, or are they providing valet and providing partnership with a private parking? So I'm just trying to understand what.
Yeah, it may have components of collecting fees. The other option, which it may recommend and develop fees to support, is that we have a fee collected for downtown parking.
So
and
what
so
we're
it's all a package,
okay.
but it could be either or.
So just so I'm clear then, tonight we're not. Tonight we're being asked to consider in concept to allow for or recommend that we allow for an in lieu or park once program of some sort. We don't yet know what that program is going to be, but that's going to be something that will be developed, assuming that Planning Commission recommends and Council approves. Is that
Right. If
okay.
if you recommend tonight that this goes forward, then we will be able to have these new tools that we can use to
Okay.
address parking.
okay? So we don't yet
So-
know how we'll use.
But-
Right.
But
Okay.
with that in mind, I mean, a couple things. Who's gonna finance this? Is it the in lieu dollars that finances this, or is it building, the people that own the buildings, are they gonna finance? I mean, that's the financial aspect is a little bit confusing from my standpoint. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I'm aware of this concept because I actually have a friend's son who's working for a company in Los Angeles, and they're bidding on USC right now, where they're gonna just take over the parking lots, and the cars get parked one time, and then they're providing shuttle service, valet service, and everything else around the campus and the surrounding campus. And that's the parking concept that they're selling these days in Los Angeles.
That's one that you can use with single owners. Cities like San Jose have developed it where it's multi-owner. So there's different varieties of it, and it will have to have either its own financing mechanism or commitment from the city, from new development. So it will be incorporated into
but
it.
the other side of the coin that I'm hearing us say too is that we're being asked to approve this concept and get that. But at the same time, the reason why you're pursuing this concept is because you want to reduce the parking requirements for the buildings downtown to a certain level.
I think what we want to do is we want to use I would question the way you're saying that. We
I
don't
question myself
necessarily
when I say
want
some
to
things, too.
reduce the requirements, but we want to make sure that our parking inventory is used, and it's used efficiently and effectively.
So-
It's just like we have a resource. We have parking spaces that are not being used, and yet we're asking people to provide for parking spaces. So can they rent spaces from our parking structures? Can we get them better? It's all
currently
these tools.
So what I'm understanding is currently it's black and white. You're trying to develop something, you've got to provide X number of spots.
That's right.
And yet we have parking structures that are available right now that are not fully being maximized or utilized, and there's different, you mentioned the 24-hour uses, and so it's more dynamic than just a black and white. You need this use, you need to provide. So what currently though, it's our codes are black and white, and so
Right.
what we're being asked to consider is to allow for some flexibility so that we're able to create that balance,
Right.
and don't end up with requiring an over-parked area, and truly to allow for that downtown, that urban experience.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
That's
one of the good examples is we require, right now, the only place we've allowed off-site parking to actually purchase in our parking structures is for residential, and they have to do it for 24 hours. You know, they have to rent the space, and that space just becomes the residence. And it makes sense in terms of a residential use, but what about an office use? I mean, how can we make the office use work with the restaurant use, work with the...
So currently, we don't have that flexibility. What we're being asked is to approve this concept so that you can go out and build out this program to be able to come back.
Chase.
Yes,
Because
we
it's
did,
residential.
but we did.
Residential.
We did, and it's for 24 hours, but it was for 24 hours. And that makes sense for a residential
And
use.
the 2700 concept that's being proposed, or was, I understand, being proposed, is that the office building would use the parking during the day, and the residents that lived in apartments that were above the parking garage would use it at night.
That's, yeah,
2700.
and 2,700.
So that answered, if I can, I have two questions. That answers one question that I had, and it makes sense, and I see that, the reason or the rationale. The other is the driveway amendments reference. I just want to clarify if, and I understand why in some certain cases there would be a need for wider driveways, and what's being requested here is consider administrative relief. And I imagine there will be some type of protocol where it's not just a standard somebody requests, but that they're actually, basically, if you have, folks can in general say, well, we need it because we need fire trucks to come through, but there would need to be some additional analysis and rationale, that staff would put them through the application or request it in order to have it merit that request, I'm assuming, right?
Sure, that's exactly correct. So right now, the code as written was adopted in 2010 before the city switched its fire service to the Orange County Fire Authority. So since then, the Orange County Fire Authority has standards that are just fundamentally different than when the city had its own fire department. So as a result, if you're mandating that a driveway can only be X feet wide, but an applicant comes through the door and needs it to be different to meet Orange County Fire Authority's requirements, then that puts the applicant in a position to have to apply potentially for a variance just to meet fire safety requirements. Similarly for waste management, since 2010, the city, in working with waste management, has revised its standards for trash pickup as well. Trash trucks are no longer allowed to drive into a project and come out on reverse onto a street. So sometimes areas have to be a little bit wider to provide wiggle room, all these things. So what this would do would simply say that if you needed to have beyond a standard driveway for those two specific purposes, right, fire and trash services, then as long as you're meeting their requirements, then you would not essentially need to come for a variance. You just meet their standards for safety and trash service.
Thanks, and I referenced, Chair, that I had two, but I actually have one last question. I just looked at my notes here. Yesterday we considered a couple residential projects, and the housing opportunity ordinance was triggered there under those applications. Here in this case, and you reference some of the pending projects, and I think all three are mixed use that require residential, or that include residential. Can you remind me and clarify whether the housing opportunity ordinance would be triggered within transit zoning code, or if it's an allowable use? I know that if we're changing, I think zoning for a project, that's what then triggers the housing opportunity ordinance. So in this case, if it's already potentially a by right, would that be, would the housing opportunity ordinance apply or not?
So the housing opportunity ordinance has different thresholds for being triggered. One of them is areas that were upzoned due to city-initiated efforts beginning on or after a date in 2011. So I believe that in most areas of the transit zoning code that were upzoned before 2010, that is before that date of applicability. But there are other parts of the transit zoning code that have the industrial overlay right now, that when an applicant comes in to remove that industrial layer and do residential development, then in those cases certainly the housing opportunity ordinance applies. If we have an applicant in one of those non-overlay areas, just the regular mixed-use areas downtown, that wants to exceed prescribed densities right now, then on a case-by-case basis we evaluate the applications to determine whether the housing opportunity applies based on the parameters of what they're proposing.
Okay. So it sounds like it's almost case-by-case. Industrial, I understand, but in some of these core, 4th and Main as an example, First American title projects, the whole block. Do you know offhand whether that would be one where
That's a nice project.
I'm reluctant to get into non-agendized items.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I understand that. So the reason I bring it up is again, as there are tremendous housing needs within the city, and housing affordability is something that's a very real issue, and we have opportunities. And as the nexus I see is we're talking here about a zoning code that incorporates mixed use, and residential being one of those uses that has not been generally a part of this area. Part of the reason for transit zoning code is to allow for that mixed use. The idea is that if we're going to add intensity, add residential projects, add density, that they would in turn incorporate affordability as part of the project. I think that's was part of the intent of the housing opportunity zone. And so to the degree that some of those questions are still, that projects can potentially come forward and somehow not have the intent of the ordinance apply, I think there's several reasons, that being one of them, that I see just a need for us to revisit and that ordinance.
One of the, we could come back to you. We are going to be doing an update to the housing opportunity ordinance, and at that time, we're going to be looking at the requirements for applicability, and that should be moving forward in the next few months, coming to you in the next few months. So we will address that at that time, explaining, in detail the requirements for the different areas, and then what we're proposing in terms of any changes that would come forward.
And so I see that there is some nexus, although I know that that's not item on the agenda here tonight, and I look forward to having the commission be able to hear further and provide potentially some input to that. So that was my final question. Overall, the recommended amendments seem to make sense to meet some of the needs and potential projects coming forward. So thank you.
Ken?
I just wanted to clarify what you're asking us tonight to approve on the Park 1, a conceptual program only, is that correct? Because seemed to me, and also would allow the city more, your staff have more flexibility to modify or to fine tune the Park 1 program. Is that?
No, the Park 1's program is already in the transit zoning code. It's already there.
Okay.
And it's already there for Transit Village, and it's already there for downtown. We're asking you to allow that same option for the urban center.
Okay.
And then the other thing that we're asking for you to look at is in one of the zones, it says and/or, and I can't remember which one it is, and in the other one, it says or. And so we're just asking you to be able to do and/or for all of these areas, that all the districts that we're going to be having it in. So Transit Village, downtown, and the new one, which is Urban Center.
Okay.
Yeah, but is this-
My next question is regarding to open space amendment. So currently we have open space requirement for side and rear of the property now, and now we could allow for front of the property as well. So they allow more open space in the front of the property as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, right now every project has to provide open space. So that's just any project. But interestingly enough, the code says that when you provide that open space, it can only be on the side or the rear. So let's say you want to do a courtyard along 4th Street, it wouldn't be allowed because it would have to be on the back of the project site, as an example. So this would basically give flexibility to say if you are required to provide open space, you can do it anywhere on the front, side, or back. It doesn't have to only be in the back or the side.
So the open space of the consider a setback. Is that correct? A setback, say 20 feet setback from the structure to the the property line. Is that and the open area still considered open space?
It's usually something in addition to that. So some projects are required to provide, let's say, like a courtyard or a plaza or something for the public to be able to use along with the residents. And so like earlier I was stating, that often can only be on the side of the site or on the back of the site. This would say that if it works better to be on the front, then you can do it on the front. If it works better to be on the side or the rear, then you can keep it on the side or the rear. It just gives more flexibility.
So in case the development would like to create open space in the center of the complex, for example, but like consider a courtyard, is that considered open space as well, would allow?
Yes, so that could be an option.
Okay. My third question is, and also my last question, is regarding the driveway amendment. You refer to the table BT1 for the depth and the standard of the lot width and the depth standard on table BT1. What exactly table BT1?
Sure.
So table BT1 is not referenced with driveways. It is a table within the code that overviews lot widths and depths for all of the building types, so 12 of them. For tower on podium, for example, you'd have to have a minimum of a 200-foot lot and a width of 200 feet. And that's referenced, so it lists all the different building types and then all the different depths. And then when you read further in the document, there's different references to those dimensions again, but instead of relisting the dimensions, we just say see table BT1.
Oh, I see, okay, I got it, thank you.
So, I want to go back to the in lieu and Park One's thing. So, did I understand you to say, Candida, that it's essentially in all of the, it's in the TV, it's in the downtown, and we're not expanding it, but we're just kind of fixing a typo?
We're fixing, for TV, for the two districts, Transit Village and Downtown, we're fixing a typo.
Right.
And then we're adding the opportunity to use it in UC, which is Urban Center.
Okay. So, I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around, you know, at the end of the day, you know, how does this get perceived as a program, as, again, reducing parking requirements or maximizing the use of what we have for parking requirements? You know, how are we selling this? Because I'm not sold yet.
Well, then we'll have to work on you.
Yeah, well, that's always.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's a very, very innovative process. A number of communities have done it. We have some examples. San Jose is the one that comes to mind. The consultant that we are working with is very experienced in this, and what they've been able to do is they've been able to look at parking as a 24-hour resource and figure out how to get people to use parking structures and centralized parking areas in places where you don't, not like UCLA, where you have one owner who's able to, you know, work all that stuff out, but where you have multiple owners and everybody's coming into the mix.
I mean, the concept I gave you that's going on at USC, that's one company taking over the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right? But the other side of it is, you know, you go in the Bay Area, I mean, like I said, I was up there last week and I went across the Dunbarton Bridge and there was a row of buses that you couldn't see the end of it. And I couldn't, you know, I've never seen that before. Well, what it was is that Facebook is here, Amazon's here, Netflix is down the street, and all those buses are picking people up and they're taking them back into San Francisco. And most of the people live in San Francisco, but they're getting bused from San Francisco to their job in San Jose, Santa Clara, and everything else. And that's something that, you know, didn't exist 10, 15 years ago in the Bay Area. Now it's like the norm. But again, most of the people in the Bay Area, you know, in the city, San Francisco, they don't drive. They Uber. They take the bus. I mean, it's a whole different thing. We don't have that same infrastructure, and that's what I'm trying to sort out.
No, but we do have a combined urban area, a downtown area that is very, very walkable, and we have invested a lot of money in parking structures that are placed at regular intervals throughout the city, parking structures and lots. And we need to be able to, you know, that's a resource that we have. We can compete with malls if we can get that kind of structure. And that was sort of an odd, but entertainment centers, because we don't want to compete with them.
The other side of the
But
coin is, I mean, if you look at the Third and Broadway project, isn't that supposed to be taking out Third Street parking?
it will be replacing some of the parking spaces that will be coming forward. So
So parking is gonna go away there.
a small amount, yeah, some amount.
And then the Spurgeon parking lot that everybody talks about, there was a proposal at one point in time to take that out, or half of it out, and build on that.
Well, we don't have, that is not on the table right now. And so we are looking at, we are looking at these programs to be able to utilize them so that they are assets, just like other cities use buy down land, other cities do other things to get businesses to come here. This is an opportunity that we have to encourage investment in our downtown.
And if I could also offer devil's in the details for this code amendment right now, it's just proposing that guest parking and the required commercial parking in a mixed-use project would be eligible for Park Once. So this would not, as proposed, this would not allow a residential development to satisfy its per unit parking with the Park Once program. It
Yeah.
would essentially say that if you are a residential development and you're required to have 20 guest parking spaces, but 100 parking spaces for your tenants, only the guest parking spaces would be able to be satisfied through the Park Once program. Only, like, let's say you had a mixed-use project with 10,000 square feet of commercial space, let's say, and it required 30 parking spaces. Those 30, not the residential part, could potentially be satisfied through a Park Once.
It's just like we talked before about the Chase project. Remember the residential project? That project was had to purchase those parking spaces, and they have to purchase them 24 hours. So there would be no change in that.
But it's also worth highlighting that that was done through a variance application, not through a Park Once program.
No, yeah, we can't do that. Yeah, you have to,
But it was also a negotiated rate, too.
right.
Yeah. I mean,
But they could have bought those spaces anywhere,
Right.
not necessarily anywhere
I
that
get
they
that.
could have found them.
I mean, that was a unique way of doing it, there's no doubt about that. Okay, so what you're saying is the parking requirements for guest parking is eligible for this kind of a program, but not necessarily regular owner parking or tenant.
Correct. That's what's proposed in the amendment.
Not for, yes, not for, but the commercial, the retail, the restaurants, the offices can all take into account that 24-hour clock on when their maximum demands are going to be, and the structure can be, the program can be structured so that it takes advantage of the availability, which is what we want to do. So are you convinced?
Am I convinced?
What, yeah.
Well, I mean, the only other thing I was gonna say is that, I mean, the other side of that parking management, Park Once, I mean, there's also the concept that is in San Francisco that's now being used, where that you go on an app, and essentially it directs you to.
That's
where
one of
to
the,
park.
that's one of the tools that you have in a Park Once program. Yeah,
that's
we
all.
have them you have them in
Now
Chicago.
you're
you
getting
have 'em-
close again.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah.
Almost there, but not quite close.
We can also share that I think the consulting firm is, I think, headquartered in San Francisco, or at least has major regional offices there,
Yes.
so they know what they're doing.
They know about those apps.
Mr. Chair, if I can add, no, I appreciate the fact that one is that you're referencing other examples outside of the city, outside of Santa Ana, and particularly other urban areas that are a number of years ahead of us. If that's the opportunity that we're seeing, is that opportunity to activate, to think innovatively, to look at apps. I think about, we have the city parking structure at 5th and Main, we have the city parking structure at 5th and Spurgeon, both of which oftentimes are not fully utilized. We're sitting even now, granted it's a couple blocks away, but you've made reference of whether it be Uber or shuttles or trolleys, a number of other things. We'll actually have the streetcar here in a few months. We're sitting on the super block right here at the Civic Center, where we have so much parking right around this space alone. The county is finishing up some additional parking cross street. They also have a healthcare agency parking at 5th and actually the other side of right across from Mil Jugos. I'm forgetting the street, but 5th, I guess 5th and Broadway. So there are several parking structures that are government owned that we don't typically necessarily incorporate or think about as part of these potential retail or commercial used for or available for retail or commercial uses. However, through this concept, what I'm understanding is that part of what we would be looking at is innovatively, how can we marry these two and use the resources that exist around us to facilitate some of that.
Getting on Dave's concept, I mean, the parking that's here, is that city or county?
Parking that,
Where we park when we
where
came
you
in?
park is county, where we park is city. So it, where you park is county, yeah.
Okay. But I mean, again, that sounds like that could become part of the program too.
It could be, we don't, it could be, so.
Because I mean, at night, this is, well, 11 o'clock at night, it doesn't get utilized. We know that from last night, but that's okay. But, yeah.
In regard to this parking program, do we have an estimate of the cost to get this consultant and the cost to implement the program?
Yes, we do. We're still going to be moving forward to council this month to get approval for the consultant and the funds, but we are hoping to move that forward.
Okay. Do we have like an estimate of how much it would be to run this program? I'm thinking it's only downtown area.
So our scope of work for the proposal will be dependent on finalization. We're also looking at, before we fully implement these programs, doing counts of the existing structures to make sure there is capacity. We want to have the data there available for any of the nearby retailers that use that or residents to say that there is the capacity. So it would include parking counts, an analysis to see if our code could change. Right now it's 2.15 per unit in downtown. Is there flexibility with the streetcar coming online? These now available options for parking for it to be reduced. And then to come up with these programs like what we could do for wayfinding and apps and potential toolbox for us as our Park Once program.
But I think the question that's being asked is, how much is the consulting contract that's
At this
Lisa's,
time,
yeah.
this time we don't have a contract yet. The contract will be going to council and you can find out at that time.
I'm just concerned about adding more costs. If we already invested in structures for parking and it did not serve anyone, and now we're going to invest in consultants and all these programs, and what if it fails to fill the parking to capacity? What's going to be the cost to the city? And so that's a huge concern for me, to come to this program not know what's an estimate to the city, because this is a program the residents are going to be paying for, and what if it fails?
I guess the response to that is our parking structures are empty now, or large portions of them are empty now. I don't know if you've, they're underutilized. So what we want to do is we want to use an asset that we bought and make that generate revenue for us. And that's the rationale behind it.
Thank you, Candida. I'm just asking because before this commission, I was in the Community Development Commission, and we got to meet a lot of the businesses in downtown area. And one of their concerns is consumers don't come to this area because there is a lot of homeless issues. And some people were closing saying we could be getting more revenue in Newport Beach on Thursday night instead of Santa Ana. There's no one coming by. So I'm just thinking the issues are more than just having people park in the structures there. I feel like people just don't come in downtown.
Yeah, and I think we're getting a little off topic because we're supposed to be focusing on the land use issues here, but that's a bigger problem than land use issues, and I think but I have to pat us on the back because I think we've done a tremendous job in terms of addressing some of those issues in the last year. So.
Yeah, that would mainly concern the cost. We don't know the cost. I fully don't understand the program other than what the chairman has talked to us about, and if it's going to be successful, what's the likelihood. So I really don't feel comfortable going forward with this program at the moment with the information I've been given.
You're not voting on going forward on this program. As I said, it's as presented, all right. Because right now it is in the code in certain areas. It's in the code, and we will, we are anticipating going forward with it once the contract's approved by council. And so then maybe you may have some more for the downtown area. So right now, we're only asking you to include it for urban center as well.
Let me just ask one question on that. How many votes do we need? I thought you were.
Yeah, for the park once, I mean, it's one of those things where you get a study, we bring it back and inform the commission, and if it's not something that ends up working for Santa Ana, or there's parts that we say will work and others don't, then you default to what the code requires right now. It's not like, let's say we don't actually implement the park once recommendations. It's not like we don't have any parking standards right now anyways. The default would be you go back to requiring, or you continue the status quo, which is, okay, please provide X number of parking spaces as is currently required. So to frame Canada's point, it's like all we're doing is giving the option to utilize what could come in a certain part of downtown, but we're not even looking at what that is right now because we still need to come forward with recommendations. That's just the way that I could help kind of frame it.
The other thing that comes to mind a little bit here too on parking, I'm sorry to beat this but it's the easiest one. There's an arrangement right now with the Downtown Inc. and other organizations down there where a certain percentage of the parking monies goes to the downtown, it goes to Downtown Inc. and some of the other organizations downtown. How does this, it's nice to have this concept that we're talking about, but there's a lot of pulls and pushes from different areas as to how this works in totality. And that's the only thing that concerns me. I think there's an uneasiness of saying,
Right.
how does this all work?
How does this
mesh together?
yeah.
Because everybody wants a piece of the action. You're trying to utilize existing assets better. We're probably, with the three projects that we had, we're probably 3 years off of any one of those projects even breaking ground.
Unless we make it more
Before-
difficult for them.
What's that?
What?
I said unless we make it more difficult for them, in which it'll
Yeah.
be
Yeah, which makes it
10 years maybe.
could make it 10 years. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. This is an option that is available in our code right now, and we're asking for cleanups, basically, and we're also asking to extend it to the urban center district. Those are the two questions. I think you're really struggling. I'm hearing a lot of struggle from you with this. So perhaps your role is to look at it from a land use perspective on whether or not you're comfortable with that as alternatives for parking. And as Commissioner Cano says, she's not comfortable with offering this as an option to parking, and that's what I'm hearing from you as a source of doing that in this.
Can I just be kind of clarify, because I think we are making it a bit more complex than needs to be, and maybe I started that, and so I apologize just by asking about the I just was trying to understand how in practicality would be implemented, just out of just to better understand, but to clarify, this is a tool, the Park Once program, that is already currently available and allowed as part of the transit zoning code. We saw it as an option when the commission and the council approved this back in 2010. As staff has gone through and looked at projects that have come through, at the time it was the transit zoning code was a conceptual code that hadn't yet been implemented. Now that we've been implementing it for a few years, you've identified cleanup language, you've identified ways that it could be improved. What you're bringing before us is that urban center could also benefit from Park Ones that's already allowed in other areas. So you're asking us to consider to include it, ultimately to be able to address, make use of resources that we have. And so that's, it's looking at it that way, it's fairly simple and straightforward. It's a tool that you're asking us to allow you to continue to use and expand into other areas within.
Thank you, yeah, and that's helpful. I want to make sure everyone has the full information for tonight. So in the code right now, where it's currently allowed as an option, simply says parking may be satisfied through in lieu fee and Park One's program if established. So even before we think about the Park One's program and all that, it needs to be established, which means, as Candida was saying, we have to bring that Park One's program concept and its recommendations to Planning Commission for consideration before we even start saying, okay, now you can use the Park One's program. We don't even have that Park One's program right now because it says is if established. It's not established yet. So tonight's action is not to establish that Park One's program. It's simply to say, take that language, and on that map where you see the different colors, right now that dark red and the regular red, that's where that language already is. Right. All we're going to propose to you is that we take that language and now apply it to the areas that are colored orange, which are already in the downtown area. They're just like on the ring of downtown, but they're the buildings that we see all around us. That's all I wanted to highlight.
So I'm just going to go back. We've got 3 projects right now: First American, Third and Broadway, and Red Oak North. Those are the 3 projects that would benefit from this proposal. And so my simple question is, when we look at First American, are they going to be benefiting from the Park Once? Are they going to be benefiting from the height, or how does that work?
We don't want to talk about the project specifically today. Those
Okay.
projects will come to you separately.
Okay, for the Park Once program, it's in the red, so think about where those are on the map, and that's it. But the other, in terms of the other issues, height and those kinds of things, we would like to move forward to allow those to be implemented on any applications that are currently or in the future would be coming before you. So height, open space, driveways, all of those would be for...
Just for clarification on height, I saw 2 numbers. One was 10 stories, and the other one was 25 stories with a podium. And
That's already, the 25 stories with a podium already exists in the downtown, yes. Yes. So we're not asking you to change that.
okay,
Just for clarification, the 25 is allowed in the dark purple area, which is near the train station, not in the downtown area. So we're not proposing any change to that 25 story. It's just the 10 that you were mentioning.
The 25 only gets into the transit.
Tower on podium, yes,
Correct.
yeah.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
Mr. Chair, I was just realizing we haven't opened the public hearing, so I don't know if we're ready to do that yet, or...
I think I just want to make sure we have all the questions
Okay.
from us first with staff.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. We've got to go through the steps. Okay. Anybody else have a question for staff? Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. All right. Madam Secretary, have we received any written communication on this item?
We have not.
Okay. With that, we will open the public hearing. Would anybody like to speak on this item? Hearing none, we will close the public hearing and we will bring it back to the commission. David, any discussion?
I think we've had a fair amount of discussion. I don't have any additional questions. I do feel like our questions were clarified, and again, it's fairly simple and straightforward. I think we maybe I complicated things a bit more than needed to be, but it makes sense. It's a tool that's there that we want to be able to make better and more full use of.
Right.
And so with that, I'm ready to make a motion that we recommend to City Council the zoning ordinance amendment number 2019-03 to amend several sections of the Transit Zoning Code, SD number 84, including modification to height, massing, open space location, driveway standards, lot dimensions, and amending various options to satisfy required parking.
Okay, do we have a second to that? Second. Phil, thank you. All right,
I would
any-
like to, would like to make a comment,
Go
if
ahead.
possible. I'd like to see if possible any proposed changes in our city code or ordinance and so on. Should we recommend staff, if possible, to conduct research comparison with the surrounding city in Orange County, that will be what would proposed changes will be in comparison and close to the surrounding city. So by doing that, would make Santa Ana as a business-friendly city, and make Santa Ana as a welcome to all business and development to our city. That's the reason why I don't want to see our city being the most, right now, far as I know, that would be most difficult city doing business in. So is that possible? That's all I'm asking.
So you're asking when we bring forward code amendments to you to
I
do
would like to have a comparison
comparisons
with other surrounding city.
with
That's
other
correct.
cities. We could do that in the future. We tend to have we tend to have form-based codes in many of the areas that we're seeing development in right now. And the standards for form-based codes are slightly different from what you would find in a traditional code. So it may be difficult for us to do everything, but we could do height, maximum height. We could do some of those things in terms of analyzing things in the future. Yes.
My main objective, if possible, to make Santa Ana as a business-friendly city and
All right.
welcome any future development, welcome developer to our city. That's all,
Okay.
if possible.
Thank you.
Mr.
David.
Chair, if I can react, I would certainly agree, and I appreciate Commissioner Nguyen's comments. Mainly, and I understand, Ms. Neal, that the comparison to other cities at times might be apples to oranges, if you will. But I think what I'm hearing, the spirit of what I'm hearing is we want to make Santa Ana a more business-friendly city, and that there would be so that we could see the economic development, impacts, positive impacts. So I would agree that as we consider recommendations or proposals, changes such as this one tonight, if we were to be able to see what the impact, how is this going to ultimately identify Santa Ana as a more friendly, more business-friendly city? What is this ultimately going to mean to a prospective, a business that would then help to provide some context and realize, okay, it's more than changing a code for the sake of changing a code. There are economic implications. It will help to be able to bring relief to prospective businesses and such. Through that lens, I think it just adds to the
That would be-
context and strengthens.
That would be it.
So that's just
Yeah.
Yeah,
We can do that in the future, I guess. The Park Once program was designed to be business-friendly and to help businesses that wanted to come into the community. So the idea of streamlining it and making it more accessible to more businesses was one that was
makes sense.
designed to
I
do that.
think the one thing that comes to mind that could make it a little simpler is that, maybe it's not a random comparison, but I mean, for instance, why couldn't we say Anaheim, Costa Mesa, and Irvine, whatever, maybe pick 2 or 3 cities, and those become the baseline of comparison and baseline of measure, so that we can, I mean, right now today, if we take any one of the reports that are put together, you've outlined costs, you've outlined opportunities from an economic development perspective, you've outlined those benefits of this project going ahead and being approved. So if we did this in comparison to 2 or 3 surrounding cities on a periodic basis with certain projects, that probably would be an easy way of kind of showing, are we moving in the right direction?
Yeah, that sounds like a good suggestion. Thank you.
Does that satisfy you, Ken?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. And is there any further discussion on this? Hearing none, we'll take a poll. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so it's 4-1 with 2 absent, Cynthia Contreras-Leo and Eric Alderetti. And we have 4 votes, so we're good. You're satisfied, Lisa? All right, well, we want to keep you happy with that. 2 days in a row. Okay. Thanks for doing the presentation, you guys. Good job. And we'll move on to public comments, or not public comments, but comments. Staff, any comments?
We have no comments. Thank you very much for all persevering through last night. That was hard, and then coming in today. We really appreciate it. It's helping us move forward on some things. Thank you all.
Okay. Any other comments from staff? David, any comments?
Not tonight, Chairman, thank you.
Okay. Felix?
None either. Just wanted to say thanks to all the staff for the hard work.
No, I have no comment.
You guys are all speechless. It's unbelievable. Okay, it's just I'll say just a couple things. One is I want to thank Vince and Candia for coming out to the chamber meeting today and talking with the government affairs group. I think that was a big help, and I hope you guys felt that it was worthwhile in your time to come out and see what's going on from a government affairs perspective. I also want to say, and not to take away from anybody else, but Ali, I think you did a great job with the presentation last night for Main Place Mall. I think the way you presented it was outstanding. And I can tell you that a couple of the people from Main Place Mall afterwards were really appreciative of how you put that presentation forward and how you explained, the nuances of things that people could even, would go over their head. But you did a great job of doing that, and I appreciate what you've done for that. Enjoy Napa,
Thank you, Chairman. The only thing I'll say is we work as a team. We've got really good mentorship here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's not a reflection against anybody else, but you did do a good job on that. I must say that, well appreciated. It kept Angie awake. That's a good thing, it kept Angie awake, and that was good. But no, it was very good from that standpoint. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting to May 28th. We're not having, it's a Tuesday night for everybody, because it's Monday is Memorial Day. Want to wish everybody a happy and safe Memorial Day.
I'm sorry, Chair, before we adjourn, I just realized that we did not excuse Commissioners Contreras-Leo and Alderetti. If we can go back to that,
yeah,
please.
we do that. Okay, so you're right. We have a motion to approve the absences of Eric Alderetti and Cynthia Contreras-Leo. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So it's 5-0 with the absence of Eric Alderetti and Cynthia Contreras-Leo. Thanks for reminding us. Again, everybody have a safe Memorial Day, and we'll see you on the 28th.
Just 1 second, please. And then get that. Okay.
Yeah, knock some sense into this. It's
saying I love trees. So they just recruited me to go plant with them. So that we're going to transition. Serious, and if I could have the founder and CEO of Orange County Children's Therapeutic Arts Center. Mental Health Awareness Month, and so it's a very, very serious topic, and I know Dr. Jimenez Jami works with a lot of families and children who unfortunately suffer from this, and it is a very, very difficult thing. We have it prevalent in our city, as many communities throughout the country have, but it's the leading cause of disability in the country now. And nearly 20% of adults in California have experienced mental illness in their lifetime, and it contributes to one's overall health, mental health, and is responsible for sustaining thought process, relationships, productivity, and the ability to adapt to change in the face of adversity. The stigma of mental illness is toxic to those who suffer from mental health conditions because it creates an environment of shame, fear, silence, and it prevents many people from seeking treatment. For us, I guess it's it's something that is very obvious in our community for many of us who deal with the homeless crisis that's happening not only in Santa Ana but throughout the county. We realize that the condition that many of those folks suffer have a lot to do with conditions, and mental health is one of those prevalent conditions that we see as a common thread to many of those folks. And nobody is immune from it. You're not immune from it. It doesn't distinguish between race. It doesn't distinguish between gender, socioeconomic status. It can affect anybody. And I'm sure that many of us probably have dealt with this directly with somebody in our family, a friend, or somebody that deals with it themselves. Personally, I know in my family we've had, unfortunately, this condition that we've had to deal with, and it's a heartbreaking condition because it's not like a broken limb. It's not like something that's a physical condition that you can treat, you can put a cast on, you can visibly see. But for mental health, it's something that's very, very difficult to detect, and it's very difficult to condition to treat. So you can't apply a prosthetic to it. You can't just simply wish it away or rest and expect that it's going to get better. It takes some very, very complex treatment for it to be overcome. And I'm very